أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters. I'm here to do, I hope I'm last but not the least, I'm here to really discuss knowing your rights. I've lived now with Prevent, as I'm sure a lot of my fellow colleagues on the panel, for about 3 years. I've now become what's called a Prevent lawyer. That's all I do. And it can feel you leaving quite despondent. Just yesterday I received a Facebook message from a sister who said that she's about to lose her children. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know who to call out to. I hope you would have heard from her. So this affects us all, whether you're parents, whether you're not parents, you could be an uncle, an auntie. It affects us all, whether we're service providers, whether we're ill people that go to the doctor. It affects every one of us. So inshallah, I just wanted to show you the kind of statistics of channel program referrals over the years. So can we go through them quickly, please, Brother Faisal? That's pretty astounding, isn't it? The 2015 figure, I mean, is 3,955. And this comes directly from the horse's mouth. This comes from the National Police Chiefs Council, who get their figures directly from the Home Office. You have to remember that when you get to the channel program, and a lot of them are children, incidentally, and disproportionately Muslim, before you get to that stage, a child has to go through a number of meetings, sometimes dealings with social services, interviewed on their own without their parents on a number of occasions. So a lot of them may not have been referred to channel, but they've gone through the long process of Prevent, and it is absolutely awful for a lot of children. I met a 4-year-old that still has nightmares about Prevent officers. I've met a 2-year-old autistic child who is so scared of going to her nursery, has refused to go, and mother had to pull her out. I've met parents who think that they're going to be raided by police officers and have stayed up at night. I've met parents who've called me who've said they can hear funny sounds in their homes. And these are all intelligent parents, and yes, sane, completely, and a lot of them are professional, but they believe that they're being spied on by MI5. This is how paranoid Prevent has made the Muslim community, and I've seen an awful lot of fear. And I've also seen, not just I, but a number of people who, when they speak up, are posted all over the Daily Mail, they're posted all over the Sun, enough to try and intimidate those of us that speak out, inshallah, and I'll come to that later on, inshallah. Okay, can we come to the next slide? Okay, again, please. Okay, your children actually have rights. They are interconnected to yours, but they are actually quite separate as well. And if your children are older, or even younger but quite intelligent, it's important you start to discuss this with them. I know that sounds a bit funny, but it's absolutely essential to being able to give them confidence. So let's look at some of the things that you should be talking about. Now, as a lawyer, I've got my lawyer's hijab on today. As a lawyer, it's important to start building a case. What we should be doing as your lawyers is preparing for the worst. And what you should be doing is hoping for the best. And we have to come together. And as we are preparing for the worst, you are hoping for the best. It works. So every child in law is considered to be vulnerable. And the younger they are, the more vulnerable they are. So let's look at the obvious vulnerability. The first one is learning disabilities. Have you told your school that your child has learning disabilities? It's very important that you do, because they could be saying, oh, your child is acting weird, they're doing something unusual, but they become more vulnerable if they have learning disabilities, which means that they are entitled to more rights. Now, I've mentioned here autism. Go on to the next slide, please. Autism, because I've met a disproportionate number of children who have been flagged up to prevent officers who are autistic. One of them was singing anasheeds in Arabic. Very bright child. Arabic is not his first language, but he learned them very quickly. And the teacher was beside herself listening to these anasheeds, and she called the prevent officers in. He was 4 years old, and the prevent officer actually interviewed him without telling mother, and was asking him very specific questions. Now, alhamdulillah, everything turned out all right, but this had a terrible impact on the child. Can we move on? Physical disabilities. Now, you may think that, okay, that's quite obvious to the school, but talk to the school about how that impacts the child's, well, I can say this in Arabic, nafsiyya, their disposition. Because some children get very upset sometimes at not being able to do PE, and some children don't get upset. It varies. Now, that can't be read into, and this has actually happened to one of my clients whose child was actually in a wheelchair and got very upset regularly, and they called a prevent officer instead of a welfare guidance officer. Can we move on? Dyslexia. Sometimes when a child is cross-examined, I'm going to put it like that, by a teacher about what they've written, and this has happened in one case I've dealt with, they've written something and it was questionable. The teacher, when asking the child about it, he couldn't actually read back what he'd written. And the anxiety of being asked by a teacher on his own made him even more unresponsive. So that meant that the teacher just presumed that something funny was going on and called a police officer. You must report these things to the teachers and the head teachers. Make sure you make a note of it. And also ensure that the school understand that that makes your child more vulnerable and that they will be entitled to have you present, not interviewed on their own, and actually have their own solicitor present, if they so wish. Okay, unclear vulnerability. There are some things that we can't read into that are not immediately obvious, but you must tell teachers when your child feels anxious, when they feel stressed, maybe moving home, maybe they've had an animal die. I know it sounds really strange, but you must report these things because you are building a case to stop prevent officers coming in on the basis of some signs of radicalization. And signs of radicalizations are a bit like the WMDs in Iraq. They do not exist. And the evidence that they present is so farcical, as you've heard from my brother, Asim Qureshi. I don't understand how prevent is still going. So we need to be ready to explain why our children have anxiety, why they have stress. Maybe someone in the family has died. Maybe they're being bullied. Sometimes when children are bullied, they become very introvert, very quiet. I mean, I can tell you, my daughter was bullied in her school, and she started talking to the trees and the flowers because she felt she had no friends, and it was heartbreaking. And I was pulled up. I was asked why this happened, and I explained to the teachers because she's being bullied and you've done nothing about it. So speak to your children, make sure that they understand. The next one is puberty. Now, most officers I've spoken to haven't even reached this, but you have to understand that puberty is very, very delicate, sensitive thing, especially for Muslims, because we protect our honor and we speak to our children about this. So, you know, they have growing pains, they have all the physical things, but also all the emotional things that come with it, which is depression sometimes, and we have to explain that to the teachers. Okay, and the other one is that some children are just afraid of authority figures. Not everybody is confident to go up and speak to a teacher or be spoken to. Most children would want to avoid it at all costs, especially if they've been spoken to about something they've written which could be related to some sign of radicalisation. Okay, inshallah? Every child is entitled to these things. Not to answer any questions. I've actually told my 5-year-old, who is in fairyland a lot of the time, not to speak to anybody who is not in the part of the school, no one she's ever seen before. And that's very difficult to get across. So the way around this is actually to write to the school or speak to the school and say, look, my child has anxiety, they're not very confident, they have dyslexia, so I don't want anyone strange to speak to them unless I'm present. Yeah? So that's very important. The next one is to have an appropriate adult present. Now, the police officer may say, we don't deem you to be an appropriate adult because we think you're part and parcel of a radicalisation process, which is what I had from one prevent officer, unbelievably. So, but they still have a right to have somebody there. Now, the prevent officer said to me, oh, I think we should call social services in order to put mother under pressure. No, it needn't be social services. It can be an uncle, it could be an aunt, it could be a friend. They just need someone who is an appropriate adult. And then you can, once that interview, if the child wants to go ahead with the interview, which I find amazing that they even think that a child can give consent, but you can actually stop the whole interview and say, I don't give my consent. But if you do give your consent, and I'm one of those lawyers, I'm afraid, who says never, ever give your consent to your child being interviewed by anybody, because what they're doing is building a case. You should speak to a solicitor first. Next one, please. To have their own legal representation. Now, I had a 15-year-old boy who said to me, I have no belief in the lawyer that my mother has got. I want my own lawyer. And he was entirely entitled to do that. Your own children can actually instruct their own lawyers. So I've actually dealt with 15-year-old boys who've had their prayer room removed, and their mother just sent me a letter saying, I give consent for you to speak to them without my presence, and we can deal with anything that they want to talk about. So they are entitled to have that, inshallah. Moving on. Okay, now your parental rights. What you should do. Okay, this is in the circumstances where a prevent officer just suddenly appears from nowhere. It's amazing, it's like fairy dust, and there they are. And this has happened a number of occasions. One prevent officer started to bang so hard on my client's door that he actually damaged it in order to get her out. Okay, if you get caught, yeah, just open the door. Immediately, you may see an officer in uniform. Unlikely, you'll probably see someone in plain clothes who'll say, hello, and they'll know all about you, Mrs. Khan. I wondered if I could have a word. Immediately, ask them who they are. And you want to see their badge, you want to get their number, get the mobile phone out, yeah? Who are you? Next. What do you want? And they have to tell you what they want, yeah? I mean, if you could just keep this at the side, memorize it, remember it, you're perfectly entitled also to just slam the door in their face, yeah? You don't have to answer the door, and even if you've answered it, you don't have to keep the door open. You can close it at any moment, say, I don't want to speak to you. Next, please. Now, this is a case where they brought you in for a chat, and you've suddenly realized that there's a prevent officer involved. You know, when the schools say, oh, we'd like to have a chat with you, and suddenly this strange prevent officer walks in and says, oh, I'd like to ask you some questions. I'm here to help. You know, they're always here to help, of course. And you have to ask these questions. Am I under a legal order to answer any questions? And of course you're not, because you're not under arrest. And even if you were under arrest, you don't have to say anything. Most people go no comment. So I assume that they're going to say no, but a lot of them have been known to say, well, it's more helpful, isn't it? Try and coerce you into an answer. You might think these are pretty obvious while we sit here and we discuss them, but wallahi, I've seen people make such mistakes that are not minor, they're quite major, and what the officers have done is go to social services and produce all sorts of evidence that really shouldn't have been evidence in the first place. Okay, let's move on. Am I under any suspicion of a crime or prevent-related incident? That's very important that you ask them. Now, what you should be doing is asking questions, not answering anything. Okay, next slide. What you should do, get your mobile phone at the ready. You know, we all do it when we've had a car accident, someone's bumped us. The first thing we look for is our mobile phone. That's the first thing we should look for if we get someone strange approaching our door or even approaching our child. Get your mobile phone ready, especially if it's in a public place. If it's not in a public place, make sure that you tell them, I'd like to record this, do I have your consent? And if they say no, that's the time to sort of turn on your heel and walk out. Say, well, sorry, I haven't got anyone here with me. Okay? Take pictures or videos. Videos are the best, yeah? As soon as you can. Next one. Refuse to answer questions, of course. And the next. Seek legal advice immediately. I had very able clients. Some people are more scared, some are much more. She phoned me while the prevent officer was there. And she said to me, I've actually asked the prevent officer to read my palms and read my child's palms to see whether I was going to be a terrorist in the future. And it really threw the prevent officer off. And he didn't want to speak to me and then said to her, look, we'll talk about it some other time and such nonsense. So, you know, be ready to even make off-the-cuff remarks because the whole basis upon which they're there is going to be, for most part, absolutely ludicrous. You know, some of the cases that I come across. Okay, let's move on to what your obligations are. Go to a prevent training. I had one very excellent sister ring me who said to me, I've never spoken in public. I've never actually got up and said anything anywhere. But we've got this parental prevent training tomorrow, and I've been invited by the school. And I said to her, look, you have to go. And I went through the whole thing of what to say and what to do and what to expect. And she actually did one thing that turned the whole discussion around. When the prevent officer says, well, if somebody says that they're going away, ask them for their ticket. Yes, I mean, it's really that ludicrous. Ask them for their ticket to see when their return date, where they're going. So she piped up all of a sudden. She said, oh, Rachel over there is going away. Rachel, can we see your ticket, please? And then all the parents started laughing, and the prevent officer felt really silly. And then he was saying, you know, if your child starts to change their clothes. She said, well, I wore red yesterday, and today I'm wearing black. Does that mean anything? And it just became more and more ludicrous. In the end, the prevent officer said, I'm going to stop here. This lady obviously knows more about, but wallahi this happened. This lady obviously knows more about prevent than I do. It is discriminatory towards Muslims. And the head teacher apologized to her and then joined the trade union and boycotted prevent. I can't say this strongly enough. It's hard. It really is. When I speak to clients and I say, oh, you must be brave, I've stopped doing that now. But the minute you start to show it for the flaws that it has on simple premises like that, you will see the reaction that you get. It may not be this particular prevent officer was very honest, but it's the rest of the room, especially if your child goes to a non-Muslim school, a state school. Other parents will start to say, look, hang on a minute, this is ridiculous. We can see that this is silly. Okay, next one. Set up parents' association. I've said this a number of times. There are a lot of weak parents, some that don't speak English, some that are just not sure of the system. There are Syrian refugees over here at the moment who just don't even know, are trying to get to grips with living in Britain, let alone trying to deal with something called Prevent. So if you are, and all of you are, capable, have the English language, intelligent, able, then it falls upon you to start some kind of parents' association with other parents. Even, I've seen 2 parents do it in one area, and they've got now 100 members, and a lot of them are non-Muslims. Supporting Muslims by saying, look, if you get caught up with the head teacher, we will go with you. They have witnesses there. We will record everything that's happened if you tell us. We have interpreters. They have 5 languages between them. So subhanAllah, please set them up in your area, and it will start small, but you'll see it grow. And of course, you know, we're all willing to help you. I'm willing to come down and help you with all the legal advice, anything. But please set them up, because there are a lot of women who are scared. I know one sister who's of Moroccan descent. She came over here 2 years ago, and her son was pulled out within 3 months. She didn't know what was going on until we discovered that he was actually on the Channel program. No consent given, not even being told that he went through Prevent or anything, but he was going to the Channel program within the school. I know this sounds bizarre, but it's happening. Moving on. Raise Prevent with your school. Don't be afraid. They obviously, there's a lot of them hide the policy because some of them are quite frankly quite ashamed of it. And some of them don't really like feeling like they're the left arm of MI5. So a lot of them would want to go discuss it with you, especially if you're Muslim. So go up to them and say, you know, can I talk to you about your Prevent policy? What is your Prevent policy? Can I discuss it with your governors? They will welcome it. And those that don't, well, it's your right to raise any issue related to any of their policies at any time. You're the parent, that's your child. Okay. And the most important thing is the 3 R's. Regard, use these, keep them open, get a couple here as well. Anything, I don't know how to put it, apart from dodgy, happens in the school, pick up the phone and speak to a solicitor. I had one lady call me and she said, oh, I've taken my child out of nativity, and the teacher just made a very off-the-cuff remark and said, oh, I'll have to report that to the head teacher. She was on the phone to me straight away. Why are you reporting that? Reporting it. Record everything, whether it's mobile phones. Please make sure you back it up. I had one client lose everything because she didn't put everything on iCloud. I'm not technical. And she lost her phone, and it was a disaster because we lost the conversation she had with the Prevent officer. And the other thing to do, yeah, back it up. And the other thing to do is if you've forgotten to take a video of your meeting with any Prevent officer outside the school premises, outside your home, wherever, make sure that you take a video of you reacting to that meeting. So straight away, say, I've just had a meeting with a Prevent officer, because it's a contemporaneous note. It's a contemporaneous note of what actually happened. And not only that, we'll be able to see how panicked and upset you are. It's amazing how we can present that to court. I'll give you an example. I had a case of a client who was charged with basically stealing £15,000 from a bank. And they had a video footage of her standing for an hour waiting for the bank to do checks. And because of her demeanor, there was no sound. The police lost the video. They miraculously found it when the judge said, I'm going to throw the case out. But it was an hour long of her just standing there like this. Her whole demeanor, well, no panic, no concern, no fidgeting, no weird, signs of wanting to steal something. So what ended up happening is the jury just acquitted her on that basis. So please, just video your whole reaction to it. Redress. Don't be afraid to go all the way up. You will have people like Cage who will help you and back you and support you. It's important that you challenge these things. And there are lots of willing Muslims and willing lawyers who are prepared to give you advice. So inshallah, don't be afraid. Let's move on. I said I wouldn't say that, and I'm saying it now. Okay, this is where my lawyer bit comes off, and this is me speaking to you as your sister. Don't compromise your Islamic values. It's so important, because that's exactly what's at play here. They want us to moderate Islam, to change our identity. And one of the things that really struck me recently, I've just started watching the Umar series. I wish I'd watched it years ago. I keep going on about it. But there was a moment in which Bilal radiallahu anhu was being tortured by Umayyah. And he was saying to his fellow Qurayshi clan that he's making me tired. He's getting tortured, but he's torturing me. So he went to Bilal while he was putting the rock on him and said to him, just compromise. Just say you've given up your deen of Islam. I don't care what's in your heart, but just say it. He didn't want to feel shy in front of the people. And Bilal radiallahu anhu said to him, there is haqq and there is batil, and anything in between is batil. Don't compromise. Don't tell your daughters that they should hide their deen. Don't stop them from wearing hijab. Don't give in just because the school has taken away the prayer room. I've seen so many children who come to me and say, I don't have the support of my parents, but they're quite happy for me to talk to you because my parents are scared. Don't do that. We owe it to our children. We owe it to our ummah. But most of all, these Bilal radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhum, these are our role models. And we want to be like them. Wallahi, I feel like a nothing in front of all of these men and all of these women. But we have to try. We really do, for the sake of our children. Can we move on, please, brother? And these are concerns. The first one is I'm afraid. Fear. Oh, it's such a disease. You know, Umar ibn Khattab, he was considered very strong, that even the shaitan used to cross the road. We've heard it all before. MashaAllah. But I just wanted to remind you of something. When they were boycotted out of Mecca, Umar was the only one who was able to go out and get food for them. And he was met by 3 men. They suddenly jumped on him to try and stop him getting the food to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and all of the Muslims. Jazakallah khair. What did he do? He stood there firm with his son Abdullah next to him. And he said to them, if you want to mourn, if you want your mothers to mourn you, then come and attack me. And they got scared. Abdullah asked Umar, his father, radiallahu anhu, weren't you scared? And he said, yes, I was. I couldn't believe that. Yes, I was. But I have to fear less than they do. I have to show them that I fear them less than they do. And I can't give in to my fear. And subhanallah, courage only comes when you feel fear. So we all feel fear. Wallahi, I've been so fearful sometimes. But you can't let that fear overtake you. You really can't. And as soon as you start to speak, wasn't it Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam that told Abu Bakr Siddiq, how can you be scared when the third of us is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Wasn't it Musa alayhi salam who said to Allah, I am scared, and he said, I am with you. Don't fear, brothers and sisters. We have a responsibility to our young children as young as 7 months old. 7-month-old was recently taken away from her mother. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Because her mother was showing signs of radicalization because she'd become Muslim. She'd become Muslim. Moving on quickly. People say we might make our situation worse if we don't engage with prevent. Let me guarantee you, you will make your situation worse if you do engage with prevent. That's all I'm going to say about that. Moving on. We must tell our children not to talk about Islam. I asked a sister recently, who would you like your boy to be like? And she said, Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, Umar, radiallahu anhum. Then I said to her, but these are just stories to him right now. He can't see these people right now. He's 9. You have to be the Umar radiallahu anhu. You have to be the Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. You have to speak up. A lot of children are told to go and defend themselves in front of the schools without their parents going. Your children will follow your example. Don't pray for them that, Ya Allah, make them better than us. Be better than that, and they will follow in their footsteps by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can't stress this enough, inshallah. Moving on to my last point. We should hide our values and beliefs. Well, that's pretty hard as a Muslim woman. I get amazed that people say, oh, you should tone it down, don't bring attention to yourself. We're hijabis. So our identity is all over us. And most of our husbands have long beards. Yeah, their identity is all over them. We don't want to hide who we are because, quite frankly, we're proud to be Muslim. We have to be proud, and this is just not rhetoric, because I've seen parents, wallahi, out of fear and out of trying to hide who they are, and I blame Prevent for doing this to them, for destroying their homes, who have destroyed their children. But if you are strong, they will be strong, and Allah will make you stronger. So don't hide the fact that you're Muslim, be proud of it. And the last point I make is unify. I know this sounds weird, but I've seen so many Muslims let down other Muslims sometimes when they've been reported to Prevent, and the other Muslim child has witnessed something, and the mother says, no, I don't want to be a witness. Please don't do that, because that sister will account you on the day of judgment. And remember the surah, Ali Imran, verse 103, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وَاعْتَصَمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold fast to the rope of Allah and let there be no divisions. Stay together. Stay together, support each other. Walhamdulillah, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Jazakum Allah khair.